Welcome. This is an archive tape. My name is Fred Barzyk.
Michael Ambrosino.
Olivia Tappen.
We're going to take you on a tour of the building and try to give you some stories about the place before it's all torn down, because in just 3 months from today, which is the end of June 2006, in November, this will all disappear.
In 1955, the year WGBH went on the air, I drove from the Charles River to Harvard Square 2 or 3 times looking for the station and couldn't find it. I didn't know what number Mass Avenue it was. The reason I couldn't find it is because it was the top 2 floors of a regular commercial building. There were restaurants and a record store, Mrs. Schwann's record store, the Schwann of the Schwann catalog, a drugstore where Norbert Wiener used to come and hold court, and the top 2 floors were rented by WGBH, one half of it, and an electronics firm in the other half. And this was the plaque tied to one of the great Doric columns that said WGBH had been formed because several foundations actually gave all of their money to it and went out of business. The original building was a abandoned roller skating rink, and the floor was so uneven that we had to nail the damn thing down.
Hello, come on in. This is the present-day Connors conference room at GBH 125 Western Avenue. And I'm going to tell you a memory or two about this place. It is currently used for meetings, large and small, presentations. But back in the 1964 and 1965, when I first started working here, this was the videotape library and traffic department, where tapes were shipped in and out, because back in those days, that's how tapes got from one station to another for broadcast. And in this room, there were rows and rows and rows of videotapes. And everything was a 2-inch videotape back then. Each tape weighed about 10 pounds, perhaps. Very heavy material. Friday afternoons, people used to stop in and they would share Cokes, occasionally a beer, I think, and talk about station gossip. Back behind this wall, where there's now a kitchen area, was a series of film editing rooms. Back in those days, there was more film going out on air than there was videotape. And at given times of day and evening, somebody would run out and say, oh, it must be time for a break, let's get some beers. So somebody would run out and grab some 6-packs of beer, and we'd bring them back in the editing rooms. And we'd all enjoy a beer or two while editing film. And then when the beers were done, back in those days, the ceiling was the kind where you could push up panels. So we would push up one of the panels and throw the beer cans up into the ceiling, up in the air cooling system. And when this room came under construction, somebody started taking down those ceiling panels and nearly got killed by falling beer cans.
This Connors conference room is famous for many things, but at the end is a lovely oil painting of Ralph Lowell. One of the great shames is that he's often thought of as the money man, and he provided the extra money that made this place go, which is true. But he was also the fellow, whenever WGBH was thinking of doing something serious or dangerous, he was the one who said, go do it. And so provided the station with not only the financial wherewithal, but the backbone as well, so that we knew that the head of the Board of Trustees was behind the station, and this was not a problem to be dealt with.
Well, I was on the crew in 1958-59, and Jack Hurley, who was then head of finance, would give me a cab slip. It cost $1. The cab would take me to Ralph Lowell's bank, Daddy Lowell, as we called him, and I would collect a little bundle. And I found out later That bundle was cash to pay for the payroll for that 2-week period because GBH didn't have enough money, even there were only 40 of us. The state of the art at this moment was a projection. This is, remember, 2006. This was a high-def imported television, all in Japanese, so you have to kind of know the Japanese symbols to make it work. And the control box, I think built by John LaBounty, an engineer, had all of what was then considered the latest gear, which was a receiver, amplifying systems, speakers for here, betas, 3/4 inch, 1/2 inch, and the continuous ubiquitous remote controls. This, ladies and gentlemen, was the state of the art of WGBH in 2006. I know this is now a kitchen, but once upon a time, this used to be editing rooms. And I remember one night, late at night, in through the front door came Dave Davis and Fred Wiseman with a package of film underneath his arms. And Dave Davis said to me, "You never saw this. This never happened." Because Fred Wiseman was cutting Titicut Follies here after hours, which became one of the few films ever banned by the legislature. It was a expose on the handling of mentally ill people at Bridgewater State. Michael Ambrosino says that it's no longer banned, but until a couple of years ago, I still think it was banned. This is a typical office at WGBH. Mac computer. This place was a Mac computer. I don't even know if Mac computers are still in existence now, for those of you who are watching this. This is classical WGBH FM radio. This is their offices. Look at that, huh? Oh. I remember that Bill Cavness would send me down to Briggs and
Briggs and Briggs.
Briggs and Briggs.
WGBH used to get records from Briggs and Briggs, open up the seal, use the records for open music or closed music, give them back to Briggs and Briggs, and they would sell them.
And that was our classical music library.
Yes.
There was a gentleman at WGBH by the name of Jordan Whitelaw who was the producer of the Boston Symphony Orchestra. And he had a very, very particular way of making sure that certain kinds of announcing was done. Today, Tanglewood is handled by Ron Della Chiesa, a wonderful, charming guy who loves opera, but somebody that Jordan Whitelaw would have said, "What a meatball." This is the jazz area. This is the back door to 125. And I believe this is where the large sound box used to be for reverberation. They used to have a wooden box. Will Morton would have to turn on the box so that it would echo sufficiently enough to sound like we were recording in Symphony Hall. Do you know about that?
No, but I know that at one time we actually did have a orchestra in the studio, and we sent the sound to Symphony Hall and picked up the sound from the old BSO microphones and brought it back here to get the BSO sound.
Wow.
Before that, it was all tape delay to get that round sound.
Hi, we're doing an archive tour of WG125 as it goes down the tubes. Hi, your name is?
I'm Kathy Rose.
That's Dave Atwood over there.
Hi, Dave.
So what happens in this room?
This is part of broadcast operations. We keep the videotapes, and now more and more server files are under our area. So tape storage and sort of scheduling programming and records that from PBS.
And how long have you been at GBH?
Going on, I think, 16 years.
Typical of WGBH.
9 o'clock on a Friday morning. Michael Ambrosino show goes on Tuesday. Ralph Sheets walks into the editing session. Freddie and I are there to make the edit. One day to shoot, one day to edit. And tears are coming down Ralph Sheets' face. And he says, "Michael, I have tapes 2 and 3 of Michael Ambrosino's show." And we said, "Where's tape 1?" He said, "I think we recorded the governor on it last night." Tape was so expensive. that you just used it over and over again. This station, each Christmas, would record Robert Frost with Louis Lyons. And Louis Lyons would say, "Well, what are you writing now?" And Frost would recite his latest poetry. That stuff's all gone. We don't know where in the ether it went.
All right, moving down the corridor to FM Library. Your name?
Alice Abraham, 20 years radio.
20 years radio. Unbelievable. Isn't
And
this,
AWF and everything.
yeah, this place is unbelievable. How people stay so long.
The collection here is over 80,000 recordings, CDs, LPs, though I'm carefully weeding out the LP collection in anticipation for the move.
Yeah, right.
But our programming format includes classical, jazz, folk, blues, and world music.
Has life gotten easier without Robert J. Lurtzmer?
That's not a fair question. I started my career here working for Robert J.
Okay.
Charlie Smith was the percussionist of the Boston Symphony, Boston Pops. One of the stories that Charlie told Ron Della Chiesa for one of the BSO intermissions was that they were recording the Leroy Anderson syncopated clock. And so they went to Charlie, Fiedler went to Charlie and said, "Give me the loudest, biggest alarm clock you got." So Charlie went to the drugstore and said, "I want the loudest alarm clock you got." So drugstore, Mass Ave, sold it to him. They recorded the next day the Leroy Anderson syncopated clock. And the next day he returned it because when are they going to use this alarm clock for syncopated clock again? And the druggist says, "What's the matter?" And he says, "It wasn't loud enough."
And your name is?
Brian Bell.
And how long have you been here, Brian?
Oh gosh, I started in November of 1985.
Okay, now we're moving over to FM. This is one of the announced booths. You can look through the window. Nobody's there right at the moment. We're on the air, and it's just playing. And here's one of the other studios.
That used to be Robert J.'s studio.
And this is where Robert J. and Ron Della Chiesa sat. Any Lurtzemer stories? The first time I saw Robert J. Lurtzemer, he was wearing a cowboy hat and cowboy boots, and he was standing around during a show called Folk Music USA, because my lead guy, Dusty Rhodes, had a nasty habit of drinking too much, and Robert J. figured he could get on the air the first time that Dusty got drunk, and he did. He got on the air. He then became a FM personality, and he was a catchman in the circus. And he used to do push-ups and sit-ups and headstands in between while the records were playing. It was always an interesting thing to see a half-naked man standing on his head at WGBH FM radio. But that was Robert J.
He also was wise enough to know that when he did get the music bit from, 6 o'clock until noon, that he should do it for 7 days of the week. And that was one way of assuring that he would find an audience and the audience would be loyal to him. So he did that program 7 days a week for years and years and years.
We're going down into the FM studio where a lot of classical music, folk music has been run over the years. This is a slope here because they would move the instruments down here. And this is WGBH FM's large studio. It is constructed, I've been told, in a very unique way that there's air all around this so that there would be no sound of airplanes or any other noise. Totally, completely baffled. WGBH Workshop made a deal with a local producer by the name of Andrew Silver. He was going to do Kurt Vonnegut's short story called The Murderer. He hired James Wood, to be his lead actor, and he hired Minor White, one of the great still photographers of our time, to be his lighting person. 2 of the scenes were shot here with Minor White adjusting the lights. A very unique potential. Did it make any real difference? Not really.
More often than not, when this studio is available at lunchtime, we would come here and have yoga class.
Multitasking, that's GBH every time. This is the, obviously, voiceover room or the special recording room. State of the art for GBH FM 2006. Mic mute, cough button. This is where the equipment gets fixed, and this is the control room for the large studio. Still using tape machines, I see, at least for playback, I guess. This is the state-of-the-art audio panel. Stereo Master, it's called. Stereo Production Console.
In the early days of WGBH radio, Parker Wheatley, who was the manager of radio and television, decided that the radio audience should also have intermission. And so for about 20 minutes, WGBH would broadcast crowd noise.
Bill Busick was, he was the one that devised the single microphone hanging over the Boston Symphony Orchestra for the best sound, and became a kind of tradition that the one microphone was the best way to record, until we hit stereo, of course. And this is the hallway, main hallway at 125 Western Ave. All right, give us your favorite story about 125 Western Ave. What happened? Come on, get it beyond.
The day Rich Harrison's dog took a crap on the tape floor.
That was great.
That was the best.
That was the best. That was the best. Now we're going into master control. We're now moving to TV master control and tape room. State-of-the-art GBH 2006. Your name, please?
Steve Douglas.
Steve, how long you been at GBH?
I'm working on my 26th year.
Happens every time I ask anybody. It's over 15. Can you tell us what are you controlling? How many stations? What's going on?
We're controlling 7 stations through analog and digital transmitters. This is channel 2 analog and channel 44. Then up on the 6-segment monitor, we've got the digital channels. The top left and the bottom left are channel 19. And the 4 on the right are channel 43, which is our digital channel 44 transmitter. And that's divided up into a simulcast of WGBX, the State House at the moment, the World channel down below it, the Create channel on the top right, and the Kids channel on the bottom right. To be fully high definition, it would have to be the only station on the channel. And right now we're sending out channel 2 and that signal as well. So it's not quite high definition, but it's the highest definition in the market.
What's the biggest crisis you've had here?
I don't know if I can say really.
One of those, huh? Okay. Tell me about Namjoon Paik and blowing out the transmitter.
Yeah, I got a funny story about Namjoon Paik, who was one of the original video artists. And actually, he did very well for himself. One day, I was assigned to work with him on a project. He was given some Rockefeller grant or something, and he was making this video art. He was doing these patterns on the monitors that he had modified the yokes to. And so one day, I'm working with him, and I'm looking at these patterns revolving, like they're very, very interesting patterns. He said, "Mr. Fairweather, you see that?" And I said, "Yes." I said, Lissajous patterns, which have been used in laboratories for ages and ages to analyze phase relationships of waveforms. And yes, it says, Lissajous figures. And he says, "Yep." He said, "Keep belly full, many years in Manhattan." So that was Namjoon. Namjoon, because he was coming forth with these really out of spec video and chroma levels mainly, that there was so much power in the 358, the subcarrier, that it actually burned up the vestigial sideband filter of channel 44, I believe.
Small problem.
Small problem, like expensive problem.
Tell me about editing down here. What shows did you edit down here, David?
Oh, lots of shows, but yeah, over in the edit suite.
Show me where.
Over there. The one thing that comes to mind about this room, and the engineers will not like this, is what's called match frame errors.
Match frame errors.
And I think we used to wait hours, if not days, trying to get match frames right. Match frame is when you back up and make an edit right into the same material right on the match frame, picking up where you left off so there's no interruption whatsoever. But I can remember spending quite a bit of time waiting to pick up on a match frame error, and if it didn't happen right, then the picture would shift.
When we got to editing, here was what happened. We would edit on 3/4 inch, and then somebody would come in and mark down the SMPTE code numbers. Then somebody would have to type in the SMPTE code numbers, and that's how you made your edit. Then somebody said, we can devise something where the SMPTE time codes will be put onto a disk, and then you can put the disk in here. So what the question was, how many edits could you accomplish in an 8-hour day? In the first round, we were lucky if we could get 35 to 50 edits done in a day. The next step, we were up to 175. By the time it ended, they were hitting almost 400 edits per 8 hours. And this room, which cost probably $1 million, including all this equipment and the tape machines on the outside, 1 inch, probably cost nearly $1 million. It hasn't been used in 5 years. So the state-of-the-art 1990s is of no other value at this moment. It just sits here empty.
Fred's story about how many edits could be done in a day, and Fred was famous for keeping track of things and how much you could get done in an 8-hour period, either in editing or in the field. And actually, Bill Fairweather, that we were just talking to, is famous for a quote talking about Fred's production mode, and the quote was, "Fred Barzyk has done for television what McDonald's did for the hamburger."
This became an editing room too, but it looks like it's been stripped. There's nothing here anymore. No monitors, no nothing. Oh well.
It says Parlant Française number 3, series 3. This has got to be with Anne Slack.
Bonjour tout le monde. Encore une fois, nous sommes sur le Mont Blanc, dans les Alpes.
What year again? 61.
61.
Something like that.
Just before the fire.
This is who
Nancy
brought the
Margot.
tape by.
Nancy Margot. Now she's a grandmother.
He presses a buzzer. He is then given a chance to win for his favorite charity the total amount of 500 new francs. However,
Margie Paxu was Dave Davis's secretary. She then left WGBH and went to Canada, her place of origin, and auditioned for the CBC and became the voice of classical music throughout all of Canada for over 20 years. She may be coming to the reunion that we're holding in the year 2006. Michael and I are going past the clean room, which is where all of the gear for the master control operation resides. We had an engineer by the name of Jack Kane, and dear Jack had a habit of smoking cigars. And for years, as they were redoing these clean rooms and making them more up to date, they would find little chewed off pieces of cigars everywhere, and they knew that Jack Kane had been there. For a while, WGBH had a going business where people would be asked to be on a national show, and that instead of traveling out of Boston, what they would do is they would come to the studio, an engineer would pipe it into the telephone system, and that's how they would appear both on commercial and public television. This is the insert studio, just one camera, sometimes two, but most of the time it was just a one-time camera. And Atwood, this is where Namjoon Paik's synthesizer resided, right in this general area, which was called Studio C in those days.
Which was twice as big.
Twice as big as this.
It
went all the way over here.
outside wall.
And Namjoon Paik, the video artist, had invented this machine called the synthesizer, which he would take $100 black and white cameras, feed it into a black box, and come out with color images. His favorite device for creating those images was a 78 turntable with whipped cream and aluminum foil going around and around, and he would use that as his device. We're now moving into the place that keeps all of the gear and equipment running. The shop. Your name, please.
Hi, Joe Puglisi.
Joe, how long you been here?
I think I'm in my 31st year of hard labor.
31st year. What goes on in here?
We maintain all the electrical, technical equipment for the foundation.
WGBH lost 2 tape recorders in the fire, and the insurance paid for 2 new ones. And there was a firm that would repair them for a price. The price was $15,000 each. And the engineering department determined that that was too much, and we'd probably have to give them up. So the fellow said, "Oh, you're the educational station that burned down in Boston. Look, let me tell you what we do. Take all the tape recorders apart, wash everything you can with 1 part Vel, which is a water-soluble soap that you use if you're yachting, and 1 part water. Paint everything with it. Hose it all down. Dry it for several days with fans. Plug everything in. If it shorts out, throw it away and replace it." And for this, they wanted $15,000.
During the massive blackout that wiped out all the lights in the northeastern part of the United States, shows all stopped, everything went black. Somehow they got information that more than just Boston was dark, that New York was dark. And Dave Davis came here, we all stood around here, and he says, "I don't want anybody to panic, but I want you all to go home now, right now." And we all left.
And on the evening that Robert Kennedy died, several of us came in. Don Fauser, Louis Lyons showed up immediately in his Volkswagen demanding to go on the air. We cut the credits for the program that was on the air, and Louis sat in his chair sobbing and saying that America stinks, and did a 7 or 8 minute monologue about how this death was going to impact the United States. We then went ahead and made 2 half-hour programs for children, because everything else was for adults and it was all about mourning. And we called Fred Rogers and asked if he could do one. And he said, "I'm in the studio now doing The Death of the Fish." And so we had 90 minutes on the air for children about death and dying at a time when everything else was caissons rolling down Pennsylvania Avenue.
Stanford Calderwood, who was our leader, president for about 6 months. He had come from Polaroid. He would wear red suspenders, and he would run from that front door, and he would run up these stairs. It was rumored that he had put tape recorders and microphones in his office so that he could get info on everybody. Peter Downey was the one who told me about that. This is the engineering office down there. And this is David St. Ange. Nobody, not many people here. And down on this side is the FM offices. All right, now we're moving on to the second floor of 125 Western Ave. Well, the most unusual thing I ever had in this elevator was a horse. Jane Alexander was doing something for CBS Cable, and I rented the facilities at WGBH. It was the Diary of Calamity Jane, and it was a series of little vignettes, and one of the things had a horse that had to be standing next to it. The only way they could get the horse in was through here, and then walked him down to Studio A. Now this was the main office area for the early days when the WGBH existed only in one building, not in the 11 that they're in now, but they're all executive offices, and all the way through, back through here. Now it's the Boston Media Productions, which does Say Brother, La Plaza, and Basic Black. Yeah, and then La Plaza and Greater Boston. This was the outdoor area where you could go and have your lunch. Obviously not used too often now. These were offices, Dave Davis and Bob Larson, Mike Ambrosino, Peter Downey further down, but now it's the state of the art. editing. Cameras are taken out of the studio. There must be some kind of event going on. Now moving into Studio A. What's your name?
Randall Gray.
Randall, how long you been at GBH?
Since 1978.
And what are you doing?
Right now I'm putting the site because they're having a luncheon for Fetch, which is one of the shows here at GBH. They're having a pre-season, if you will, luncheon for all staff involved.
This is one of the few places, I think, in this building that has not changed at all, except for the lighting system. But the studio itself is, as I remember it, when I walked in here in 1965. Yeah, there was a story about Chaz Norton, one of the head lighting guys here, who was up on top of an echo lift and was basically doing some lighting by himself, and had the lift extended up and was holding onto the lighting grid, trying to pull himself across the floor of the studio. And as the story goes, the echo lift went out from underneath him, and somehow somebody discovered him hanging from the grid and got him down.
When the building was under construction, I told Hartford Gunn that he could have a visitor walk in the front door, go down the hall, go up the elevator, go into his office, and think he could be in a shoe factory. Never know that this was a TV station at all because nothing was visible. I strongly suggested, and he agreed, that we put a window into Studio A right in front of his office. And that is the Michael Ambrosino Memorial Window. Of course, that was before the building was finished. As Studio A was finished, what was the first thing that was done? Well, they bought a big cyc, and they covered up the window. Just like that. So they put a announce board on the other side of the window, and they had little announcements that were there. I don't know how much that cost WGBH, but I've always considered it my window.
All right, let's do a quick tour. Right here, I remember this was Lotta Lenya doing a performance right there, Lotta Lenya. I remember right here, Leonard Bernstein, Bernstein, conducting with an orchestra here and one in Studio B. Over here, the Coasters brought them in here to do what was the name of that? Yeah. Mother's Little Network. Over here, Olivia, help me. Oh, it was David Silver sitting with the guy from Transcendental Meditation. Here, this is where I remember Henry Morgenthau giving his speech at the 2000 reunion, in which he said WGBH did mediocre programs, but they gave really first-class sex. Well, he said, no, not first class, maybe economy. Pete Seeger, right over here, doing a show called Two Links of a Chain. French chef Julia Child, right there, here.
Her counter was right about here.
Right.
Back of the set back there, and then the dining room. It was just about here. the dining room wall was right about here. It's right here. The first time that I ran camera on the French chef, I was running the close-up camera. So I had the camera way up in the air, shooting down on the table, getting the close-up, and they said, "Break one for the dining room," and I broke like this, except I hit Paul Child right there and knocked him almost over to the wall. And that was the last time I ever ran camera on the French chef.
Gunther Schuller conducting a modern piece of music. No, it wasn't. It was ragtime. Remember, he brought ragtime. So that took place right here. There's so many memories on every inch of this floor.
Kevin Bacon in Lemon Sky.
Kevin Bacon, Lemon Sky, right there, right over.
David Wilson.
David Wilson.
Riding around the studio on a motorcycle for part of one of the What's Happening Mr. Silver programs. That was a program that I threatened I was going to quit my job at GBH because it was way out for me. And that program actually went on to win a Programming Excellence Award. God bless you, Fred.
Everywhere in the studio, in every conceivable floor space, we did for 20 years Alistair Cook's Intros to Masterpiece Theater.
Right.
Alistair tells a great story. For those of you who remember the Intros to Masterpiece Theater, he said he was in Florida giving a lecture one time, and after the lecture, a woman came up to him and said, "You know, I just want to tell you, Alistair, Mr. Cook, that I love your set." And he said, "Well, which one is that?" She said, "Well, one of the bookcases in the armchair." Now, for all of Alistair's time, there was a different set for every series. Every series had its own set, right, Bruce? Right. And it was designed by Fran Mahard and Clint Heitman.
The set she may be thinking of was the Muppet, who did Alistair Cookie. That was bookcases in the back and a big wing chair. And he would say, "Hello, I'm Alistair Cookie, and this is Monsterpiece Theater." So I bet that's what she was referring to.
He had this odd habit of wanting to have salt on the set all the time. And before he would start, he would take a little salt and put it in his mouth. And I said, do you want some water? He said, no, salt is much better. Salt keeps you wet, keeps you from drying out. And I've always remembered that.
Yeah.
And helped people to stay wet through many productions.
Over here, Abby Hoffman threw LSD across the room on a What's Happening Mr. Silver show. Over here, we had Joan White and Alex Peary in a bed in Stan Vanderbeek's Violence Sonata. It caused the Boston Globe to write an article about a black woman and a white man in bed, and Kevin Kelly, he had great concerns about what we were doing here at Channel 2.
We're Lily Tomlin and
Danny Aykroyd.
Gilda
Radner, and Dr. Irwin Corey.
Right.
And we were doing a piece that Jane Wagner and Lily Tomlin had written called Collisions, which actually never really saw the light of day. It was an experimental, never finished piece of video.
The students took over Harvard University in the 70s, and the university president would not speak to the students. So a member of the Board of Overseers brought a couple of the other Board of Overseers to the WGBH studios, and in an immense table, students and the Board of Overseers discussed what was wrong with Harvard University, and WGBH televised it live for hours on end.
We were doing a production with Kurt Vonnegut Jr. called Between Time and Timbuktu, and at Kurt's request, we had Bob and Ray running Mission Control. It was a story about a space poem competition. And Bob and Ray were on the set, on camera, and they were trying to recall what Neil Armstrong said when he first stepped on the moon. And they could not get it right. And Vonnegut was sitting just off camera and got laughing almost so hard that we had to stop the take. And if you've ever seen that show and you listen to the two of them trying to remember those lines, you can hear Vonnegut in the background going.
Here's another event that took place during one of the auctions. There was a large turntable with showcasing some furniture. On one side was a living room, on the other side was a bedroom. Sally Dennison, who used to be my production assistant, had gone off to become a Hollywood casting director, and as a matter of fact was in town looking for Antonioni's lead actor for a movie called Zabriskie Point. And I had introduced her to a guy by the name of Ed Beardsley. They had become fast friends, and Sally was a rather uninhibited young lady. She and Ed had a bit of stimulants, let's say, and they had decided to take off their clothes and to jump in bed so that when the turntable turned during the auction, you'd find the two of them comfortably wrapped in each other's arms. I pleaded with them not to do it, and I finally got them onto the studio. Thank God.
Everywhere, uncontrollable wires running in every space, in every direction. I would go to other production houses and there would be almost no wires, and I'd come back and go, why can't we have no wires? But it came from there's an early tradition, it was long before my 40 years here, that you had to have wires. everywhere. On the floors, on the walls, on the ceilings, and probably even in the brand new control room. This is A Control as rebuilt the second time. There's been 2 rebuilds of A Control. When I first came here, the monitors were basically there. Audio booth was over there. There was a row of seats here, theater type seats, fold down. Video was up front next to the wall. If we go up here, we look very closely, we will see masked wires. And I bet if we go down here, we'll say more, although this is not like it used to be in the old days. I get actually feeling very uneasy with this few wires. And they've done a darn good job, I think. Audio is that black hole up there. But I've personally found this control room really easy to work in. It was really done right. The GBH controls are actually modeled on CBS control rooms, if I remember correctly.
Correct.
But the layouts were a replica of CBS. Right.
Greg Harney came from CBS, and he was production manager, and that kind of influenced all of us. As a matter of fact, most of the directors in the early days, you had a snap to make sure that you got it exactly the right time. I remember one time when Dave Atwood was my switcher on a What's Happening Mr. Silver program called Madness and Intuition, in which we had all kinds of people all over the control room, and they were supposed to yell out when they're bored. We would change the image because the images didn't make any difference. It was based on John Cage's theory that if any sound is music, then any picture could be a television show. And I remember I was going to buy David a rolling pin so that he could go up and down the switcher and keep the things, moving. And we insisted that all of us have take phone calls after the show was over with. And David Silver, the host of the show, took one of them, and the woman said, some older woman, "Please cut that out. You're giving my brain cancer." And one of the really interesting things, David, and I don't know if you remember this, there used to be a guy who would come in here and he would take pictures of us all. He was kind of like a hanger-on. He was, you remember his name, Olivia?
Dan Healy.
Dan Healy.
Usually wore a trench coat.
Yeah, usually wore a trench coat and used to take pictures. We just thought it was just another one of those hangers-on, because we always had all kinds of people hanging around. We kept the doors open. We thought it was fun. Years later, I caught a plane out of New Jersey, and the fog came in and closed us down. We had to take a car, and I ended up in the car with Dan, and he then told me the real story. He was Army intelligence.
Oh, come on.
Yep. Yep. They had a dossier on us.
No.
Yep.
You're telling this on videotape, Fred.
I'm telling you the truth. I'm telling you what he told me. That's why he was taking the pictures.
I can remember being in the building on one of the early live Say Brothers. The first shows we did were live from Studio A under a bomb threat in which we had the building sealed. We had sealed the building, and we had the bomb inspectors had to go through it before, because we'd had a call. Somebody called in, and whether it was related to Say Brother or not, I don't know. I think it was the fact that we were doing this, African American show. And we were like sealed in here until
Wow.
they inspected. The building was shut down.
Wow.
That was like the third or the fourth show, because I only directed the first 5.
Wow. This is the Greg Harney scene doc, dedicated to Greg, who is our first and probably most important production manager. And this is the scene doc area. It used to be quite an active place when we were building lots of sets. Unfortunately, ain't much of that left anymore, so now it's mostly storage. If we go down here, this is the loading area of the scene dock. This is where a lot of the heavy gear and equipment would come in and out. Also very active during the auction period, because people would park their car, come up here, sign in there, pay their money, get their prize that they want on the auction, and head off. Those are the satellite dishes, which are way over there. This is, again, just more storage. Oh, the first auction. We were here at 3 o'clock in the morning. I remember sitting here on the steps saying, what the heck is going on, you know?
3 o'clock, it was sunrise.
It was sunrise, that's right, it was
It was
sunrise.
sunrise when we finished.
You almost never get
The bus.
the radio bus.
Radio bus. That's also where Crockett's Victory Garden was, right in there.
With the,
Is that the old TV bus?
no.
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 And Dan Beach, my boss, was fairly liberal in terms of letting me walk away from the desk and see what was going on if things weren't too busy down in the department. And I remember one day standing up here in the scene dock because Elliot Norton Reviews, which was always taped in Studio B, was taping that day, and I was standing in the scene dock and I looked up and I just happened to see Maurice Chevalier walking into Studio B, and I was absolutely flabbergasted that I had seen this guy that I had seen in so many wonderful films walking right in front of me, going into Studio B for an interview with Elliot Norton.
Jack Foley.
Jack, how long have you been here?
Since 1970.
And what is your job?
I'm a graphic designer and I work currently in the creative services department.
What's your favorite thing that ever happened at GBH? You've been here a lot of years. There's got to have been some really great moments.
That's a very tough question to answer. The Two-Mobile was great. That was a great project that happened in the early 70s. We had a Volkswagen that we stripped of its body and put a big plywood 2 on top of it. Drove it from Cape Cod all the way up to Alston here.
Totally illegal.
It was. It tried to make it through one of those roofs on a bank ATM machine and it didn't quite make it under the roof.
Now moving here, we're going through to what used to be the scene shop. Fran Mahard, Clint Heitman, Cole Bennett, and Martin Bloch, German painter. But now it's offices. And a small conference room. And back through here, his scenic department used to be designers. We used to have 3 of them. Now we have 1, and it's Cole Bennett. And that's his space. And this is the production services area. This is where they schedule the crews and all those other kind of good things, right, Althea? All right, now continuing this way, we're going to go up to the 3rd and the last floor of WGBH 125 Western Ave. This used to be the film area, but now it's for a radio show called World. These used to be all film editing rooms, now offices. At one time, WGBH had so many Steenbecks editing film that we actually had to rent motel rooms down the street at the what's now called the Comfort Inn. Again, more offices, more offices. That's them. This is the World, obviously having a meeting of some sort.
And remember, this was wide open.
This is wide open. These were editing rooms down here, film editing rooms. Right, so this is the creative services editing rooms.
In this conference room, the executives of WGBH would assemble once or twice a year to create ideas for documentaries to try to sell PBS, in those days NET. We were very full of worthy. We were just so earnest. And we were thinking up worthy programs to make about worthy ideas. And Hartford Gunn had been appointed to the board of directors of the Globe and its new TV station, Channel 56. And he interrupted the meeting to bring the new Channel 56 program manager in to meet us. And Don Fauser, always one to be reticent and calm and benign, said, "And what kind of programs are you going to put on Channel 56? And the program manager listed a spiel of old reruns and game shows. And Fowler says, it's goddamned air pollution. At which point, Hartford Gunn went absolutely red and took him out of the meeting, and we never saw them again.
Now we're Fetch, which is the new kids program, I guess.
There's a meeting going on. It's a serious meeting. Quick little.
Well, we're in this little closed elevator. I guess it's time for all of us to say goodbye, whoever's watching this, wherever you are. I'm Fred Barzyk.
I'm Mike Ambrosino.
I'm Olivia Tappen.
I'm Bruce Bordett.
And I'm David Atwood.
It will all be better in the new building.